The Baronet's Housekeeper. Chapter 1. A Position Bought with Silence. There are fools in life that make a sound, like a carriage wheel cracking on a stone. Everyone turns, everyone points, and you are left to gather up the pieces of yourself in full view. And then there are falls that happen quietly, behind drawing-room curtains, behind a closed account book, behind a single lady's smile that is not kindness, only amusement. Those are the falls that change your very name without announcing the hour. My own began, as many do, with money, not the lack of it, at first, only the mismanagement. My father, a man of education and good intentions, had trusted too easily, signed too warmly, invested in the certainty of other men's promises. When illness took him in the spring, it left us with grief in one hand and debt in the other. Grief is heavy, but debt has teeth. Within months, we were gone from the house where I had learned to walk. Within a year, my mother was in the churchyard, and I, Miss Margaret Linton, once well-born and well-dressed, was living over a milliner's shop, where the stairs creaked and the windows rattled in winter like an old woman's bones. I stitched, I mended, I smiled at old acquaintances who pretended not to recognize me. I learned to be grateful for bread without allowing it to taste like pity. And then, one cold morning in early December, a letter arrived with a seal I did not know. It offered me a position as housekeeper at Ridley House, a country seat some miles from Havisham, owned by Sir Thomas Ridley, a baronet whose name, when spoken in the town, carried a careful pause before and after, like a glass set down too hard. The wages were generous, the duties extensive, the condition singular, discretion above all. I read that line twice, perhaps 3 times. Discretion. I had learned the hard way. One becomes discreet when one has been discussed often and defended rarely. A woman who has been made into a story by others must either shout herself hoarse or learn to move quietly through the world. So I accepted. I arrived at Ridley House beneath a pale sky, the fields edged with frost, and the hedgerows bare as bones. The hired carriage left me at the steps as quickly as if afraid of the place. The house was handsome in the way of old family pride, stone, symmetrical, its windows tall and severe. Yet there was a stillness about it that made even the air feel measured, as though laughter had once been permitted and then forbidden. A man stood on the steps, not the butler, not a footman, Sir Thomas Ridley himself. He was about 40, perhaps a touch more, with dark hair that had begun to lighten at the temples and an expression that held itself in reserve. He wore a coat of good cut, but worn at the cuffs, and his posture spoke of command learned long ago and practised now only when necessary. His eyes were grey, clear, watchful, and tired. "Miss Linton," he said, as if my name still belonged to something respectable. "You have arrived." "Yes, Sir Thomas." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Thank you for—" "Do not thank me yet." It was not unkindly spoken, more like a warning offered without cruelty. His gaze flicked to my modest trunk, to the plainness of my cloak. "Mr. Dawes will show you the house." Only then did I notice the butler standing slightly behind him, like a shadow with a spine. Mr. Dawes was tall, narrow-faced, and so solemn one might think he had been born to carry bad news. His eyes landed on me with the immediate calculation of a man trained to protect a household from disruption. "Miss Linton," he said, with a bow that suggested propriety more than welcome. Inside, the hall was dim and colder than it ought to have been, as if the fires were set merely to keep stone from cracking rather than to warm living people. Portraits lined the walls. Ridley ancestors, with powdered hair and hard eyes, men who looked as though they had never apologized in their lives. And among them, on a smaller canvas, was a woman. Her gown was pale blue, her hair dressed simply. She was young, very young, and her expression was not soft or sweet, but wary, as if she were listening for something she did not wish to hear. I stopped without intending to. Mr. Dawes noticed. "The late Lady Ridley," he said. Lady Ridley. I had not known Sir Thomas had been married. Something tightened in my chest. "She—" Briefly, Mr. Dawes added, and the single word held more than he would say. No more was spoken, but the house spoke for him. The quiet, the dimness, the air of restraint, the servants' glances that slid away too quickly, the way Mr. Dawes moved as though every corridor had rules. My rooms were on the upper floor near the linen closets, comfortable enough, plainly furnished, with a small desk and a window overlooking the winter garden. The garden paths were swept and orderly, but no one walked them. It was as if Ridley House maintained appearances while refusing life. That evening, I expected to dine in the servants' hall, as is customary for a housekeeper, near enough to command, distant enough to remain proper. But Mr. Dawes informed me stiffly that the master preferred I take supper alone in my rooms. "Undisturbed," he said. Undisturbed by whom? The servants, their opinions, or by something else, some story that might leak through talk and laughter. I ate alone, then unpacked my few belongings. The keys to my new duties had not yet been given. I had come without authority, only expectation. Yet as I set my accounts book on the desk, I felt the familiar steadying of purpose. A house can be ordered. A household can be managed. Even a life can sometimes be rebuilt in careful increments. When the clock struck 9, there was a tap at my door. Mr. Dawes stood there with a small bundle of keys. "The master says you are to have these," he said, holding them out as if they were dangerous. "Pantry, linen press, storerooms, household ledger cupboard." I took them. They were heavy in my palm, heavy with permission and responsibility. "Sir Thomas wishes to see you tomorrow morning," Mr. Dawes added. 10 o'clock, in his study. "Thank you." He hesitated, as if deciding whether to say more. His gaze flicked toward the corridor beyond, toward the darker part of the house. "Ridley House has its ways," he said at last. "It is wise to learn them quickly." Then he left. I locked my door and leaned against it for a moment, breathing slowly. It was an old habit from the days above the milliner's shop. Lock the door, take stock, steady the heart. From the window, the grounds lay quiet beneath moonlight. A frost glittered faintly on the hedges, and beyond the formal garden, to the west, the house extended into shadow. The West Wing. Even from here it seemed to draw the eye like a question. In bed, sleep came in pieces. Once, in the middle of the night, I woke convinced I had heard a door closing, very far away, as though in a part of the house no one used. I told myself it was wood settling, wind pressing at shutters, the ordinary sounds of an old estate. But Ridley House did not feel ordinary. It felt like a place that remembered. Chapter 2. Keys, ledgers, and the room that must not be opened. The next morning I rose before dawn. It is my nature, when uncertain, to move toward work. Work is honest. Work does not whisper when you pass. I began with an inventory: linen, silver, pantry stores. Mrs. Pike the cook greeted my questions with a guarded face, as though each inquiry were an accusation. "We have always managed well enough," she said when I noted the low flour. "Well enough is not well," I replied calmly. "We will do better." Her eyes narrowed. I could see resentment forming like a cloud. A housekeeper who does not shout but insists is far more difficult to dismiss. In the servants' hall I met the others properly. Hart the footman, broad-shouldered and too pleased with his own confidence. Eliza the housemaid, young and bright-eyed, with curiosity that could easily become gossip. Bess, the scullery maid, thin and quiet, her hands raw from lye. Only Bess offered me a small, shy smile when I asked how long she had been in service here. "Since my mum died," she whispered, eyes lowered. It was said with the bluntness of poverty. I understood it too well. At 10, I went to the study. Sir Thomas called me in without rising at first, then stood as I entered, an unnecessary courtesy, and all the more striking for that. The study was warm with a fire and lined with books that looked used, not merely displayed. Papers lay in neat stacks on his desk, and a map of the estate was spread on a side table. He gestured to a chair. "Sit, Miss Linton." "Thank you, sir." He looked at the keys at my waist. "You have the run of the house now." "Of the parts that require management," I said. A brief flicker at his mouth suggested amusement. "Yes, of those parts." I opened the household ledger, which I had retrieved from the cupboard. "Sir Thomas, the accounts are irregular." He did not look surprised. "Yes. Suppliers change without explanation. Some payments are listed only as repairs with no details. There are sums paid in cash, large sums, without notation." His gaze sharpened. "And you want an explanation." "I need one," I corrected. "If I am to keep this household in order, I must know where the money goes." A pause. He leaned back slightly, his fingers steepled. "Ridley House has had difficulties." "Difficulties are not unusual," I said, "but secrecy creates waste." His eyes held mine. "Secrecy is sometimes cheaper than scandal." The words landed with the weight of experience. I chose my next sentence carefully. "Then we will be discreet, sir, but we will also be accurate." For the first time, his expression softened, only a shade, but enough to notice. "You speak as though you have practiced walking between those two things." "I have," I said quietly. He nodded once, as if he understood more than he said. "I will ask Mr. Dawes for details," I added. His gaze turned colder. "Dawes will tell you what he thinks you should know." "And you, sir?" I asked. His jaw tightened. "I will tell you what you must know." It was a boundary laid down, clear and uncompromising. I accepted it outwardly. Yet inwardly, something stirred, an instinct that boundaries like that existed because something pressed against them from behind. "Very well," I said. "I will begin by regularizing the accounts I can. I will revise the household schedule and assign duties more precisely. There is too much idleness, and idleness breeds mischief." A faint sound escaped him, almost a laugh, surprised. "You have noticed the mischief already." "I have noticed the potential," I said. He watched me for a moment, then asked abruptly, "Did you hear rumours before you came here?" I felt my shoulders stiffen. In Havisham, people speak of everything. "And of me?" "Yes," I admitted, "but I did not come to collect stories." His gaze remained steady. "What did you hear?" It was a trap, or a test, or perhaps simply a man tired of shadows wanting to see if someone would speak plainly. I answered with care. "That you keep to yourself, that you do not receive visitors, that something, unfortunate, occurred after your marriage." His expression tightened. "Unfortunate," he repeated, as though the word were insufficient and yet all society allowed. "I also heard," I added quietly, "that people enjoy being certain of what they do not understand." His eyes darkened. "Yes." Silence held between us. Then he said, in a voice that was almost weary, "There is one part of this house you must not enter." I lifted my gaze. "Which part, sir?" "The west wing," he said. "The suite at the end. It is sealed." My keys felt heavier. "As you wish," I said, and meant it. Not because I was not curious, but because I had learned what curiosity can cost. When I left the study, I found Mr. Dawes in the hall, his face stiff. "The master gave you the ledger?" he asked. Yes. His lips pressed together. You will find we have managed for years without excessive scrutiny. And I will find, I replied evenly, that years of managing without scrutiny has created exactly what I am now correcting. His eyes sharpened. You are bold for a woman in your position. I met his gaze. I am careful. There is a difference. He looked away as though insulted by my composure. Over the following weeks, I worked steadily. I posted schedules. I supervised inventories. I corrected laziness without humiliation. I spoke to suppliers myself and demanded proper records. I found 2 leaks in the roof, an infestation beginning in the pantry, and a missing set of silver spoons that Hart insisted had never existed. It existed. It reappeared 2 days after I announced the search would include every servant's trunk. After that, Hart's confidence became sharper-edged, resentment dressed up as charm. Eliza, too, watched me with new fascination. She liked stories. She liked the feeling of living inside one. One afternoon, as I returned from the village with receipts, I passed 2 maids whispering behind the stairwell. She's always in the master's study, one murmured. I heard she's the sort who... The other began, then stopped when she saw me. I did not scold them. I did not even frown. I said calmly, if you have questions about your duties, ask me directly. If you wish to invent tales, do it somewhere else. It interferes with work. They flushed and fled. That evening, I insisted upon taking supper in the servants' hall rather than alone. A housekeeper cannot govern from above like a ghost. Silence fell as I entered, heavy with curiosity and wariness. I ate steadily, speaking occasionally to Mrs. Pike about provisions, to Bess about the scullery work, to Eliza about linens. When I finished, I rose and said, tomorrow we begin the deep cleaning of the east corridor. By Friday, I expect the silver polished to standard. If any of you believe this unreasonable, you may speak to me. No one spoke. But Hart's jaw tightened, and Mr. Dawes's gaze rested on me as though I were a storm cloud. After supper, I brought the revised accounts to Sir Thomas's study. He looked up as I entered, and for a moment I saw something like relief in his face, quickly hidden. You have been busy, he said. I am paid to be, I replied, setting the papers on his desk. He scanned the figures, then nodded once. This is... improved. Not yet finished, I said. His gaze lifted. Do you ever rest, Miss Linton? The question startled me. It sounded almost personal. I rest when work is done. And when will that be? When the house no longer feels like it is holding its breath, I said before I could stop myself. Something tightened in his expression. You notice that, he murmured. It is difficult not to, I replied gently. He leaned back, eyes on the fire rather than me. It has been holding its breath for years. I hesitated, then asked softly, because of Lady Ridley? His jaw clenched, but he did not deny it. Yes. The room felt suddenly too intimate, as if the question had crossed a line neither of us had agreed upon. I lowered my gaze. I apologize, sir. It is not my place. No, he interrupted, voice tight but not angry. You are right to ask. You are right to notice. It is your place to keep this house from collapsing, and it has nearly collapsed. He paused, then added, people believe many things. And are those beliefs true? I asked quietly. His gaze met mine, steady, wounded. Not all, but enough to ruin a man who is already ruined. The words struck me, not because they were dramatic, but because they were said without self-pity, as a fact. Before I could answer, there came a faint sound from the corridor, like a door shifting. Sir Thomas's head turned sharply. My stomach tightened. He rose, moved to the study door, opened it, and stared out into the dim hall. Silence. Then he closed the door again with a careful click. His face had gone pale. "You heard that," he said. "Yes." He exhaled slowly, as if steadying himself. The West Wing corridor door should be locked. My heart thudded. Should be. He looked at me, one long, searching look. "Do not go there," he said again, and this time the words carried more than instruction. They carried fear. "I won't," I promised. But later, that night, as I walked the upper corridor checking the lamps, because Ridley House seemed to darken too quickly, I saw it. The west corridor door, slightly ajar, the air beyond colder, darker. My keys hung at my waist. The house was silent in that listening way it had. I stood very still, every instinct warning me away. And yet I could not help thinking, if someone was opening that door, it mattered. It might be mischief. It might be malice. It might be an attempt to frighten the servants, or the master, or me. So I stepped closer, not with curiosity, but with caution. The corridor beyond was dim. Dust lay thicker there, as though cleaning stopped at an invisible border. My footsteps sounded too loud. At the far end, the sealed suite door stared back, heavy, bolted, its keyhole like a watchful eye. I did not touch it. But as I stood there, I felt it, a presence behind me. I turned sharply. Sir Thomas stood at the corridor entrance, his face pale, his eyes fixed on me. Not anger, not accusation, fear. "You were told not to come here," he said. "The door was open," I replied quietly. "I thought someone—" He looked past me, down the corridor, to the sealed door. His jaw tightened. "Someone wants you to be here." My throat went dry. "Why?" His gaze returned to me. "Because if you learn what is behind that door," he said softly, "you will leave." The words landed like a stone. "I did not intend to pry," I whispered. "I know," he said, and the softness of that nearly undid me. "Come, not here." He guided me back, not touching, not even offering his arm, but walking beside me with that careful distance propriety demanded. Yet the act felt strangely protective. In his study, he closed the door and leaned against it as if keeping the rest of the house out. "You should go," he said abruptly. My breath caught. "Go, away." "You are too visible," he said. "They will talk." "They already talk," I replied. He looked at me then, his eyes raw. "Do you know what they say about this house?" I hesitated. "Enough." He swallowed, as if the words tasted bitter. "They say I killed my wife." The air left my lungs. I stared at him, unable to speak. "They say it because she died here," he continued, voice low and controlled. "Because I kept her away from London, because I paid physicians discreetly, because I refused visitors, because I withdrew afterward and let the story grow." My hands went cold. "Did you—" "No," he said sharply, then steadied. "No, I did not." Silence held. Then, in a voice that sounded like confession forced into daylight, he said, "She was ill in mind. She feared being locked away. She begged me to keep it secret. I tried to protect her. I tried to help her. And in the end—" His eyes closed briefly. "In the end, she died by her own hand." Pain tightened my chest so suddenly I had to inhale carefully. "Sir Thomas," I whispered, "I am so sorry." He opened his eyes. They were bright, but he did not let tears fall. "People prefer a villain," he said bitterly. "It is easier." "And the West Wing," I murmured. He nodded once. "Her rooms, I sealed them. I could not—" He stopped. "You could not bear it," I finished softly, his jaw clenched. "Yes." I sat very still. My heart hammered not with fear of scandal now, but with sorrow, for a young woman whose portrait watched the hall, and for a man living in a house that felt like a held breath. "You should leave," he said again, quieter. "If you stay, they will tie your name to mine, and mine is poison." I swallowed. "My name is already damaged." His gaze sharpened. "Yes, which is why they will enjoy combining the stories." He turned away, staring into the fire. "I hired you because you seemed capable," he said, voice strained, "and because I thought you would understand discretion. I did not hire you to—" He stopped. "To matter?" I asked before I could stop myself. He went still. Then he said very softly, "To be seen." My throat tightened. Before we could say more, there came a knock at the study door. Mr. Dawes's voice. "Sir Thomas, a visitor has arrived." Sir Thomas's head snapped up. "A visitor?" "Yes, sir, from London." The study seemed to grow colder. Sir Thomas looked at me, and in his eyes was fear, not for himself alone, but for what the visitor would bring to the fragile order we had begun to build. "Go upstairs," he said quietly. "Now." I obeyed. But as I climbed the stairs, my hands shaking slightly, I knew. London had come to Ridley House, and London never came without consequences. Chapter 3. London arrives, and the house begins to whisper. From my window, I watched the carriage turn into the drive, a glossy, fashionable thing with bright fittings that looked too alive for the muted dignity of Ridley House. It rolled up to the steps like a bold statement. Servants gathered in the hall below. Even Mrs. Pike emerged from the kitchen doorway, her apron still dusted with flour. The household had been starving for drama. London had delivered it. I remained upstairs only as long as duty allowed. A housekeeper cannot hide forever, no matter how convenient it might be for those who wish her invisible. When I descended, I heard a voice in the hall, cultivated, amused, slightly loud, as if designed to ensure everyone could hear. "So, this is where you have buried yourself," the voice said. "How tragically rural." A woman stood near the portrait hall, dressed in rich mourning that looked more like fashion than grief. She was perhaps in her early 30s, with sharp features and eyes bright with calculation. Her smile was practiced and unsympathetic, like a blade polished to shine. Sir Thomas faced her with rigid stillness. "Lady Harrowby," he said. The title landed with weight. A widow with rank, a woman with influence, and likely with purpose. Her gaze slid to me at once, assessing. "And who is this?" she asked, sweetness without warmth. Sir Thomas's jaw tightened. "My housekeeper, Miss Linton." Lady Harrowby's smile widened. "Ah, that Miss Linton." Heat rose in my cheeks, but my spine remained straight. "Lady Harrowby," I said with calm courtesy. "How enterprising," she purred, and her eyes glittered with the pleasure of implication. Sir Thomas's voice hardened. "You did not come here to discuss my staff." "No," she agreed. "I came to discuss your obligations." She spoke as though she had a right to say the word. Sir Thomas's jaw clenched. "Say what you came to say." Lady Harrowby's gaze flicked to the portrait of Lady Ridley, wary, listening, and her smile sharpened. "My late husband's sister," she said lightly, "was your wife." The room seemed to still. Sir Thomas's voice went cold. "Do not." "Oh, Thomas," she sighed, as if he were unreasonable. "We are not in a drawing room. We can be honest here." Honesty, from a woman like that, sounded like cruelty. "My brother," she continued, "wishes a matter settled before he marries. He is a practical man, you see. He prefers his accounts clean." Sir Thomas's eyes narrowed. What matter? Lady Harrowby's smile was bright. The matter of Lady Ridley's dowry. A sharp chill slid through me. I thought of the irregular payments in the ledger, the cash sums marked only as repairs. Sir Thomas's voice tightened. That money was spent on physicians, on care, on secrecy. Lady Harrowby finished, pleased. Yes, how touching, how tragic, how expensive. Sir Thomas's hands clenched behind his back. Your brother knows why. Of course he does, she said. He also knows what London believes, and he knows the difference between belief and proof is often money. She stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to pretend discretion while still allowing the servants to catch the gist. Return the sum, she said, and we ensure your name remains merely unfortunate. Refuse, and my brother will be forced to remind certain people of the more interesting version of events. Sir Thomas's face went pale with contained fury. You come here to threaten me. I come here, she corrected sweetly, to offer you an arrangement. Her gaze slid to me again. And perhaps to warn you that your choice of housekeeper will not help your cause, a disgraced gentlewoman under your roof? How romantic. London adores a scandal wrapped in a moral lesson. My stomach tightened. She knew exactly where to press. Sir Thomas's voice was clipped. Leave. Not yet, Lady Harrowby said. There is another option. Sir Thomas's eyes narrowed. No, she laughed softly. You are a baronet. You need respectability. You need an heir. London loves redemption stories, especially when they involve a man with property and a woman with the right connections. Her smile sharpened. You should marry. The air in the hall felt like ice. You suggest I marry, Sir Thomas said, voice like steel. I suggest, she replied, that you marry me. A hush fell so heavy I could hear the servants breathing. I am a widow, she continued smoothly. I know how to manage a household. I know how to smile at whispers. I can make your life easier. Her eyes flicked, contemptuous, toward my plain dress, and I can remove certain inconveniences. Sir Thomas's face hardened. You will not have me. Lady Harrowby's smile did not waver. We shall see. Then, as if remembering something delightful, she reached into her reticule and produced a folded letter sealed with wax. Oh, she said, one more thing. My brother asked me to deliver this. It was discovered among papers that should have been sent years ago. Sir Thomas's gaze went to the seal. His face shifted, surprise, then something deeper. The letter's seal was not Ridley's. It was familiar. Linton. My blood went cold. Sir Thomas took it as though it might burn. He broke the seal and scanned the lines quickly. His knuckles whitened. He looked up at me, stunned. Your father wrote to me, he said. Lady Harrowby's eyes gleamed. Yes, and now we have a delicious complication, do we not? How will London interpret it? The disgraced gentlewoman employed by the very man she once appealed to. Did he refuse her and now takes her in for charity? Or did he aid her and now, how shall I put it, benefit from her gratitude? The insinuation made my stomach turn. Sir Thomas's voice went dangerously calm. Get out! Lady Harrowby lifted her chin. 1 month, Sir Thomas. Return the money, or accept my proposal, and we will be very quiet. She swept from the hall with her head high, leaving behind a wake of whispers like smoke. For a moment, no one moved. Then the servants began to shift, glances darting between Sir Thomas and me. Eliza's eyes shone with horrible excitement. Hart looked almost pleased. Mr. Dawes's face was tight as wire. Sir Thomas turned sharply. Dawes, he said, voice clipped. No visitors again without my permission. None. Yes, sir. Sir Thomas's gaze returned to me. It was unreadable. Miss Linton, he said quietly, come to my study. I followed him through corridors that suddenly felt too narrow, too exposed. The house seemed to lean in, listening. In the study, he closed the door and stood with his back to it, the letter still in his hand. I did not know, he said. Neither did I whispered. He stared at the seal again. Your father asked me for money, for help. I swallowed. He wrote to many men, anyone he thought might. My voice faltered. I did not know he wrote to you. Sir Thomas's jaw tightened. If I had received this, perhaps. It is too late, I said quickly, though the words tasted like grief. My father is gone. The ruin is done. Sir Thomas's gaze sharpened. This changes how they will speak of us. Yes, I whispered. Now they will say I sought you out, that I came here with purpose, that I am scheming. The old humiliation rose hot in my throat. I had been accused of things before. It never mattered whether they were true, only whether people enjoyed believing them. Sir Thomas's voice tightened. I do not believe it. His belief should have comforted me. Instead, it terrified me. Because belief from a man like him, wounded, isolated, vulnerable to scandal, could become another weapon in society's hands. I forced steadiness. Sir Thomas, you must settle Lady Harrowby's threat. Return the money. I do not have the full sum, he said, and the admission sounded like bitter defeat, not without selling land. Then sell land, I said, the words tearing out of me. His eyes flashed. You would have me impoverish my tenants to satisfy a viper. I would have you survive, I whispered. If scandal rises again, if they renew the story of your wife, if they add my disgrace to it, this house will become a spectacle, and you— My voice cracked. You will not endure it. Silence. Then Sir Thomas said, Lo, and what of you? I swallowed hard. I will leave. The words dropped like a stone. His face went still. No. Yes, I said. I cannot stay and be the reason your name is dragged again. I will not be the spark. You think leaving will extinguish them, he said bitterly. I think it will remove one of their pleasures, I replied softly. I am tired of being a pleasure to cruel people. Sir Thomas's gaze held mine, raw, conflicted. I enjoy your company, he said suddenly, as though forced by honesty. I trust you, and that is dangerous. My heart stuttered. I stepped back instinctively, as if distance could protect us. It is improper, I whispered. You are a baronet. And you are my housekeeper, he agreed, voice tight. And my past, I continued, the humiliation burning, is a stain they will use to smear you. Sir Thomas's mouth twisted. Your past is not your character. It was the kindest thing anyone had said to me in years. It was also the most dangerous. That night, I wrote my notice. I folded it neatly and addressed it with careful formality. I told myself it was prudence, not heartbreak, that made my hands shake. The next morning, I placed the letter on his desk while he was out. Then I went about my duties with mechanical calm, as though I were not preparing to sever the one place that had begun, shockingly, to feel like stability. By afternoon, Mr. Dawes approached me, pale and stiff. The master wishes to see you, he said. In the study, Sir Thomas stood by the window, my notice in his hand. Hisnly he looked not furious but determined, as if my attempt to leave had forced him to decide something. You intend to go, he said. Yes. No. He turned and his eyes were bright with something fierce. No. I frowned. Sir Thomas, you cannot forbid. I can forbid nothing, he said. But I can choose. He crossed to his desk and opened a drawer. From it he drew papers, receipts, letters, folded documents sealed and dated. What are those? I asked, breath catching. Proof, he said, of physicians, of payments, of the truth of what happened here. My throat tightened. Why keep them? Because I feared needing them, he said quietly, and because I feared reading them. He looked directly at me. Lady Harrowby believes I will purchase silence again. I will not. My pulse raced. What will you do? I will go to her brother, he said. I will offer what I can pay honestly, and if he threatens scandal, I will answer publicly with truth. My hands went cold. They might not believe you. Then they will not, he said, voice steady. But I will not live like a ghost because they prefer lies. He paused, then added softly, and I will not let you be sacrificed to save me. If you leave, they still win. They still get their story. Only it will end with you chased away. Tears stung my eyes. I blinked them back. You cannot speak truth without cost, I whispered. I have paid cost for years, he replied. I am done paying with silence. He took one step closer, still proper distance, but near enough that I felt the warmth of his presence. Stay, he said, and the word was not command, but request. Stay as my housekeeper. Do your work. Hold your keys without shame. Let them whisper until they tire. My heart hammered. I wanted to say yes at once. I also wanted to run. I will stay, I said finally, voice trembling, but we must be careful. His gaze softened. Yes. And for the first time since I arrived, Ridley House felt as though it exhaled, just slightly. Yet the danger remained. Because London does not forget so easily, and neither, I feared, did Lady Harrowby. Chapter 4. Truth Spoken and a House That Learns to Breathe. Sir Thomas left for London 2 days later. The household reacted as though a storm cloud had moved in. Mr. Dawes became sharper, more rigid, as if bracing for catastrophe. Hart prowled like a man anticipating entertainment. Eliza fluttered through corridors with that restless energy gossip gives to the empty-minded. I tightened order like a stitch. Work would keep them from rotting in talk. Then, on the third night of Sir Thomas's absence, the worst sort of trouble arrived, not with a carriage, but with a whisper. Bess came to me in the corridor, eyes wide. Miss Linton, she whispered. Mr. Hart, he's been in the West Passage. My blood went cold. Are you sure? I asked. She nodded, frightened. I seen him, and Eliza too. They were laughing. Rage, rare, sharp, rose in me, not because of my own fear, but because of what such mischief would do to Sir Thomas. That wing was not a story for servants to play with. It was a wound. I went at once to the west corridor door. It was ajar. Again. The air beyond was colder, and the darkness seemed thicker, as though it had been fed. I did not go far, only enough to see the corridor and the sealed suite door beyond. And there, near the wall, was a thin ribbon of cloth. A woman's ribbon. New. Someone had placed it there deliberately like bait. I heard movement behind me. Hart's voice, too casual. Lost, are we, Miss Linton? I turned sharply. Hart stood at the corridor entrance, smirking. Eliza hovered behind him, eyes bright with malicious excitement. What are you doing here? I demanded. Hart shrugged. Just checking locks. That's your job, ain't it? Eliza giggled. I stepped forward, letting my voice drop into the calm I used when handling insolence. You will both return to your duties. Hart's smirk widened. Touchy, aren't you? Maybe you don't like this wing. Maybe you don't like what's in it." Eliza leaned forward, voice whispery. "Maybe she wants to go in. Maybe she wants to see." My stomach tightened. "You are playing with a grief that is not yours." Hart's eyes narrowed. "Grief. Is that what we call it? Folks in Havisham call it murder." I felt the world narrow into a single point of fury. "You will never," I said, voice steady and sharp, "speak that word in this house again." Hart's smile faltered. He recovered quickly. "Or what? You'll sack me. A baronet's housekeeper sacking folk like she owns the place." "I have authority here," I said. Eliza's eyes glittered. "Do you? Or are you just—" She hesitated, enjoying the cruelty. "Just someone he keeps close." The words hit like a slap. I stepped toward her, and though I did not raise my hand, she flinched as if I might. "You will leave this corridor," I said. "Now." Hart scoffed, but something in my face must have warned him, for he turned away, muttering. Eliza followed, still smirking, but her eyes held fear now too. When they were gone, I closed and locked the west corridor door myself. I checked the lock twice. Then I stood there, breathing hard, heart racing, not with fear of the corridor, but with the realization that someone in this household wanted scandal badly enough to poke at wounds. And if servants were bold enough to do that, it meant Lady Harrowby's poison had reached further than I hoped. Sir Thomas returned the following week. He looked worn, pale with fatigue, eyes shadowed, but there was a straightness in his posture I had not seen before. As he dismounted in the yard, he glanced up toward the house as if measuring it anew. When he entered, the servants lined the hall stiffly like soldiers. Sir Thomas's gaze swept them, then landed on me. "Miss Linton," he said quietly, "walk with me." We went to the study, and the moment the door closed, he exhaled like a man who had been holding his breath for miles. "It is done," he said simply. My hands tightened on the back of a chair. "Her brother?" Sir Thomas nodded. He accepted what I can pay. He did not like the prospect of a public quarrel. He prefers his reputation intact. "And Lady Harrowby?" Sir Thomas's mouth tightened. "She is furious, but she has less leverage now." Relief shook through me so sharply I had to sit. Sir Thomas watched me, then said softly, "I did not only speak to her brother." My stomach tightened. "Who else?" "The magistrate," he said, "and the vicar, and one or two men who have heard the rumours and repeated them too often." I stared. "You told them the truth?" "Yes." My voice barely worked. "What did they say?" Sir Thomas's expression was grim. Some were uncomfortable, some were sceptical, but the magistrate saw the documents. He cannot forbid gossip, but he can discourage libel. I exhaled shakily. "That is brave." "No," Sir Thomas said, and his eyes sharpened. "It is late." Then he hesitated, and for the first time I saw uncertainty in him, not the wounded kind, but the kind that precedes a question one fears to ask. "There is something else," he said. My chest tightened. "What?" He reached into his coat and drew out another letter. "This was delivered to me in London," he said, after the story began to stir. I took it carefully. The handwriting was not my father's. It was feminine, sharp, hurried. I read the first line, and my blood turned to ice. It was from my cousin, Miss Clara Linton, the very one whose careless flirtation had been used as the seed of my disgrace. The letter was not affectionate. It was panicked. It spoke of Lady Harrowby's influence, of pressure, of whispered threats. It spoke of that long-ago garden arbour incident, the half-glimpsed scene that society had transformed into scandal. And then, in a line that made my hands shake, Clara wrote, "It was not you they saw, it was me." I stared at the paper, heart hammering. Sir Thomas watched me, his face tight with restrained anger. "Lady Harrowby," he said, voice low, "used your disgrace as a weapon. She has done so before. She knows how to twist a story until it serves her." I swallowed hard. "My cousin wrote this. Now?" "She wrote it because she is frightened," he said. Lady Harrowby threatened to expose her own indiscretions unless she remained silent. But once my name became involved, Clara panicked. She sent this to clear you, perhaps as much to save herself. I could barely breathe. A heat rose behind my eyes. All these years, all that shame. The doors closed, the street crossed to avoid me, the pity smiles. And the truth had been this. I sank into a chair, letter shaking in my hand. So I was ruined for nothing. Sir Thomas's jaw clenched. "Not for nothing," he said fiercely. "You survived it. You built a life from ash. That is not nothing." Tears slipped down my face before I could stop them. I wiped them away quickly, furious with myself. Sir Thomas did not move closer. He remained at that careful distance he always kept, as if respect were a boundary he refused to cross without invitation. "I will not let them do this to you again," he said quietly. My voice trembled. "How?" Sir Thomas's gaze hardened. "By using the same thing they use, but honestly." "Publicly?" I whispered. "Yes." Fear flared. "They will feast on it." "They already feast," he said. "We will not starve to please them." He turned, went to his desk, and pulled out more papers. "The magistrate agreed," he said. "If you wish it, we can have Clara's statement witnessed. We can have the vicar attest to your character here. We can—" He paused. "We can give you something society cannot easily ignore, truth in ink." My throat tightened. "And you? Your name?" Sir Thomas's expression was steady. "My name has been dragged for years. If I can lift yours while defending mine, then perhaps this pain will at least be used." I stared at him, overwhelmed by the fierceness of his loyalty. "Why?" I whispered. His eyes met mine. "Because you matter," he said simply. "And because I am tired of letting cruel people decide what is true." 2 days later, the vicar came to Ridley House. So did the magistrate. The servants watched with wide eyes as respectable men sat at Sir Thomas's study table. Mr. Dawes looked as though he might faint. Hart hovered at the edges, nervous now, rather than smug. I sat with Clara's letter in my hands and read it aloud, voice steady through trembling. The vicar's face tightened with pity and anger. The magistrate's pen scratched steadily. When it was done, the magistrate asked, "Do you wish this to be pursued further, Miss Linton?" My stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" "If Lady Harrowby has knowingly spread falsehoods," he said, "there are consequences." I thought of Lady Harrowby's smile, her poison, her pleasure in ruining people for sport. I also thought of my years of silence, how it had protected no one. "Yes," I said quietly. "I wish it to be known." Sir Thomas's gaze flicked to mine, approval and something softer. After the men left, Ridley House felt different, as if sunlight had been poured into the cracks. But truth does not spread without resistance. That evening, Hart cornered me near the pantry, his face flushed with anger and fear. "You're ruining us," he hissed. "Us?" I said, calm. He glanced around. "The house, the servants, will be talked about, will be laughed at, all because you couldn't keep your mouth shut." I stared at him. "No, Hart. We are being talked about because you and others opened doors that should have remained closed, because you played with grief to create scandal." His eyes narrowed. "You think you're better than us. I think I am responsible, I replied, and I think you are dangerous. He stepped closer, voice low. Lady Harrowby said you'd turn him against his own people, said you'd ruin him like you ruined yourself. Cold ran through me. Lady Harrowby speaks to you. His face betrayed him. So it was true. She had reached into the household itself. You are dismissed, I said, voice steady as stone. Heart blinked, stunned. You can't. I can, I said, and I have. He shoved past me, rage trembling in his shoulders. That night, Sir Thomas dismissed Hart formally. Mr. Dawes was forced to oversee the packing. The household watched, silent and shaken, as the footman who had enjoyed stirring whispers was sent away with a small wage and a warning never to return. Eliza cried and protested. Whether from loyalty or fear for herself, I could not tell. Sir Thomas's gaze fell on her like winter. Eliza, he said, voice controlled, you will choose now what sort of person you intend to be. A servant who does her duty, or a servant who feeds on ruin. Eliza went pale. I only listened, sir. Then stop listening, he said. Afterward, when the house was quiet again, Sir Thomas asked me to walk with him. We went to the portrait hall, where Lady Ridley's painted eyes still watched. He stood before the portrait a long moment, hands clasped behind his back. I unsealed the west wing today, he said. My breath caught. You did. He nodded. Not for servants, not for gossip. For me. I am tired of locking grief away like guilt. I swallowed hard. Will you go in? Yes, he said quietly. Tomorrow. He turned his gaze to me. Will you stand nearby? Not inside. Just near. So I do not feel alone. Tears stung my eyes again. I nodded once. Yes. The next morning we went together. He unlocked the west corridor door himself. The air beyond was cold and still, but the darkness felt less hungry now that it was entered with intention rather than fear. We stopped before the sealed suite door. Sir Thomas's hand rested on the latch. His fingers trembled slightly. He did not look at me. He only said softly, I did love her. I know, I whispered. He opened the door. The room beyond was dim, but sunlight found its way through curtains that had been shut for years. Dust lay thick on surfaces. A faint scent of lavender lingered like a ghost of gentler days. Sir Thomas stood in the doorway, unmoving. I remained a few steps behind him, just as he asked, present, but not intruding. After a long moment, he stepped in. He moved slowly, as though each step were into memory. He touched the back of a chair, then withdrew his hand. His shoulders rose and fell once with a breath that sounded like pain. Then he turned, walked back to the doorway, and closed the door again, not bolting it, only closing it. He looked at me, and in his eyes was a strange mixture of sorrow and relief. It is only a room, he said. Yes, I replied softly, but it was never only a room. He exhaled. No. We walked back toward the brighter part of the house. Somewhere behind us, Ridley House seemed to shift, not with a creak of fear, but with the settling of something finally allowed to rest. Days later, word began to spread in the village, not only of Lady Harrowby's visit, but of the vicar's involvement, the magistrate's witness, and the quiet but unmistakable fact that Sir Thomas Ridley was no longer hiding. Gossip did not vanish. It never does. But it changed shape. Now people spoke with uncertainty instead of certainty. They hesitated. They wondered. Some, to my surprise, even apologized, awkwardly, as if unused to admitting they had been cruel. One afternoon, a woman I remembered from my mother's circles approached me outside the church. Miss Linton, she said, cheeks flushed. I did not know. I looked at her steadily. No, I said. You did not. She swallowed. I am sorry. It was not a grand apology. It did not restore the years. But it mattered, because it was proof that truth, spoken firmly enough, can crack even hardened cruelty. That evening, Sir Thomas asked me to join him in the study, not for accounts, but for something else. A book lay open on his desk. You never told me what you thought of the poems, he said. I almost smiled. They are melancholy. He nodded. Yes. And honest, I added quietly. His gaze held mine. Yes. A silence gathered, different from the fearful silences of Ridley House before. This silence was full of possibility, and that possibility frightened me more than any locked corridor. Sir Thomas rose and moved around the desk. He stopped at a careful distance, always careful. Margaret, he said softly. He had used my given name more than once now, but it still struck like warmth. I have no right, he continued, to ask you for anything beyond your work. My heart hammered. But I find, he said, voice steady but strained, that I do not want to live as though feeling nothing is safer than feeling something. I swallowed, throat tight. Sir Thomas. He lifted a hand slightly, not touching, only pausing as if asking permission to speak freely. I will not dishonour you, he said. I will not turn you into a secret. I will not offer you anything that must be hidden. My breath caught. And yet, he said, eyes fixed on mine, I would like, if you can bear it, to court you. Properly, slowly, with every boundary you require. Tears rose again, sudden and unwelcome. I blinked hard. My position, I whispered. Your title. He nodded once. Yes, and society will have its opinions. I gave a shaky laugh. Society has had opinions about me for years. His mouth tightened with anger on my behalf. Then let us give them something else to speak of, he said quietly. Not scandal, not secrecy, but choice. My chest ached with it. Hope, fear, longing, all tangled together. I thought of the milliner's shop, of the cold stares, of the years of being looked through as if I were no longer a person. I thought of Ridley House when I arrived, dim, silent, grieving, and I thought of it now. Curtains drawn back, servants steadier, the West Wing no longer a monster, but a memory. I cannot promise to be brave every day, I whispered. Sir Thomas's gaze softened. Nor can I. We stood like that, proper distance, yet closer than propriety could truly measure. At last, I said, if you court me, Sir Thomas Ridley, it must be with patience. I have learned what haste costs. His eyes held mine. Then we will be patient. And if society chooses cruelty again, then we will answer with truth, he said. Every time. I exhaled shakily. Very well. A slow breath left him, as if he had been holding it for years. Very well, he echoed, and the quiet joy in his voice undid me more than any dramatic declaration could have. That night, as I returned to my room, keys still at my waist, I paused at the window and looked out at the grounds. The garden paths lay pale beneath moonlight, but now I could imagine someone walking them again. Not a ghost, not a rumour, a living person. Ridley House still had shadows. It always would. But it no longer felt like a tomb. It felt, astonishingly, like a beginning. The end. Thank you, dear reader of the Regency Gazette, for joining us in another tale of love, intrigue, and whispered ballroom secrets. If today's romance delighted you, Kindly bestow a like upon this video. It helps our Gazette reach more lovers of Regency storytelling. For weekly journeys into dukes, debutantes, scandals, and slow-burning devotion, please subscribe to the Gazette and tap the little bell so you are notified the moment the next story is published. Until our next edition, may your days be filled with grace and your nights with the promise of romance.